Hello and welcome to Indus News Live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the top stories of this hour. In Mali, the military has detained President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta and Prime Minister Boubou Cissé after a coup. In a televised address after the arrest, Keïta said he has dissolved the parliament to avoid bloodshed in the country. The military said they have a plan to form a civilian transitional government that will organize fresh elections. Syria says several rockets exploded in the premises of a U.S. military base in the north of Deir ez-Zor Governorate. State media said the attack targeted the U.S. base near the Konoko oil field controlled by U.S. and Kurdish troops. The attack comes after a Russian army general was killed in a roadside bomb blast in Deir ez-Zor. Israeli warplanes have attacked the Gaza Strip in another night of intense violence. The Israeli Defense Ministry says it struck Hamas military compound in retaliation to a rocket and incendiary balloon attacks. No casualties have been reported from the raid so far. In the U.S., the Democratic Party has formally nominated Joe Biden as a presidential candidate at the party's largely virtual national convention. On the second night of the four-day event, Democrats vouched for Biden's candidacy, vowing to heal a divided nation. In a tweet, Biden said the nomination is a lifetime honor. Brazil has reported more than 1,300 deaths and over 47,000 COVID-19 cases in the past 24 hours, while the US has recorded more than 1,200 deaths overnight, raising the toll to over 171,000 with nearly 5.5 million infections. Elsewhere, India has recorded 1,092 deaths in a day, taking the total to nearly 53,000 with more than 2.7 million infected countrywide. In Pakistan, 11 deaths since yesterday have taken the toll to 6,201, with caseload of above 290,000 infections. Globally, the pandemic has infected over 22 million people and claimed more than 779,000 lives. And in football, Paris Saint-Germain outclassed RB Leipzig by 3-0 to reach the final of the Champions League at Estadio de Luis. In their first Champions League final, the Parisians will face either Lyon or Bayern Munich on Sunday. Well, that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Take care. Welcome back. Now we'll have the news in detail. We start from Mali, whose president, Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, has been forced to resign after the military detained him and Prime Minister Boubou Cissé in a coup. In a televised address, Keïta said he has dissolved the parliament to avoid bloodshed in the country. The military said the plan to form a civilian transitional government which will hold fresh elections. More details in this report.
After months of violent protests in the country, Mali's military detained the president and prime minister. The protest movement accused Keïta of corruption and worsening the security situation in the north and central regions. The opposition coalition says the ouster is not a mutiny, but a popular insurrection of the corrupt. Ex-President Keïta says he had no choice but to step down.
If today it pleased some elements of our armed forces to conclude that it should end with their intervention, do I really have a choice? Because I do not wish for any bloodshed to be spilled to keep me in office. That is why I wish right now, whilst thanking the people of Mali for joining me throughout these long years with warmth and affection, to announce my decision to resign from this moment.
In Bamako, hours of uncertainty followed after Keita's detention. The soldiers mutinied in the morning at the Kati military base where Keita was taken and rounded up a number of senior civilian officials and military officers. The dissolution of the government was followed by mass celebrations in Bamako's Independence Square. France and regional powers have condemned the ouster, while the UN has demanded an immediate and unconditional release of the president. The UN Security Council has also called an urgent meeting today to discuss the situation in Mali.
Now, Israeli warplanes have attacked the Gaza Strip in another night of intense violence. No casualties have been reported from the raid so far. The Israeli Defense Ministry says it struck Hamas military compound in retaliation to a rocket and explosive balloons. Eyewitnesses say at least 2 airstrikes hit a point belonging to the Iz ad-Din al-Qassam brigades in southern eastern Gaza. This is Israel's 8th consecutive strike on Hamas as tensions have been rising for over a week. Israel has also closed the Karim Abu Salim goods crossing with the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, Pakistan says it will never recognize the state of Israel until a just and fair solution to the Palestinian issues. In an interview, Prime Minister Imran Khan said accepting Israel is equivalent to giving up Pakistan's stance on Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Khan said the Palestine issue is similar to Kashmir as their rights have been snatched while they suffer from Israeli atrocities. He said Pakistan's founder Muhammad Ali Jinnah made it clear in 1948 that Israel cannot be recognized under these circumstances. Khan debunked rumors that Pakistan's relations with Saudi Arabia have deteriorated, saying Islamabad has fraternal ties with Riyadh. Moving on, Syria says several rockets exploded in the premises of a U.S. military base in the north of Deir ez-Zor governorate. State media said the attack targeted the U.S. base near the Konoko oil field controlled by U.S. and Kurdish troops. This is the first ever attack on one of the 12 military facilities created by the United States since 2015. Israel has been killed in a roadside bomb blast in Deir ez-Zor, while 3 servicemen are wounded. Earlier, unidentified jets bombed several towns in rebel-held northwestern Idlib in a new flare-up of violence. Now, Iraq says it has killed 10 ISIS militants in an operation in the northern Karachokh mountain. In a statement, Iraqi military says it conducted a joint operation with the coalition forces. It said 9 caves used by the militants were also destroyed in the operation. The operation comes as ISIS has intensified attacks on the security forces, including Hashd al-Shabi forces. Militants gained full control in Mosul, Saladin and Anbar provinces and seized territories in Diyala and Kirkuk provinces in 2014. But Iraqi security forces managed to regain control in subsequent years. In the United States, the Democratic Party has formally nominated Joe Biden as a presidential candidate at the largely virtual national convention. Biden called the nomination a lifetime honor with his acceptance speech scheduled for Thursday. During the 4-day event, Democrats vouched for Biden's candidacy, vowing to heal a divided nation. The convention's second night was held under the theme of Leadership Matters. Former Presidents Jimmy Carter and Bill Clinton, rising Democrats and notable Republicans, said Biden will return integrity to the White House. The speakers criticized U.S. President Donald Trump's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic and his willingness to corrupt democratic institutions.
At a time like this, the Oval Office should be a command center. Instead, it's a storm center. There's only chaos. Just one thing never changes: his determination to deny responsibility and shift the blame. The buck never stops there. Now you have to decide, whether to renew his contract or hire someone else.
Well, Biden will take on Trump in the presidential election on the 3rd of November. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump says he has postponed the trade talks with China over Beijing's unthinkable handling of COVID-19. Speaking in Arizona, Trump said he is not interested in holding a dialogue with Beijing at the moment. U.S. Trade Representatives Robert Lighthizer, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, and Chinese Vice Premier Liu He were scheduled to conduct a 6-month review of the trade agreement last week before it was indefinitely postponed. White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows said no new high-level talks have been scheduled between Washington and Beijing. When asked if he will put out of the trade deal, Trump said he had not made a decision before taking a swipe at Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden. A U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee says Russia did influence the 2016 presidential elections to help Donald Trump's campaign. The Republican-led panel released its 5th and final report on its probe into election interference. The report says WikiLeaks played a key role in the meddling and very likely knew it was assisting Russian intelligence. It alleged former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort worked with the Russians, including oligarch Oleg Deripaska. The report claims President Vladimir Putin personally directed Russian hacking efforts to breach computer networks affiliated with the Democratic Party. It stopped short of accusing the Trump campaign of colluding with Moscow to sway the election.
This report is 1,000 pages long, twice as long as the Mueller report. I would urge every American to read it, to draw their own conclusions. Unprecedented amount of Russian intervention and a myriad of contacts with individuals affiliated and associated with the Trump campaign.
The bipartisan investigation lasted almost 3.5 years. Now, the U.S. says it has informed Russia of its terms for extending a landmark treaty that limits their deployed strategic nuclear weapons. Talking to reporters, U.S. negotiator Marshall Billingsley said now the ball is in Russia's court on the 2010 new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. Billingsley said those terms include addressing Moscow's buildup of shorter-range nuclear weapons that are not covered by the treaty. This comes after U.S. envoys the latest round of talks in Vienna with Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabko. Ryabko said Russia stands for an extension of the START treaty but is not ready to pay any price for that. Meanwhile, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu discussed strengthening their trust measures in a phone call with U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper. Belarus opposition leader Sviatlana Tikhanovskaya has urged the European Union to help the Belarusians amid political crisis. This comes as the EU leaders are set to hold a video conference today to discuss possible sanctions against Minsk. President Alexander Lukashenko has deployed military on its western border amid growing protests against the August 9 elections. Tikhanovskaya urged the EU to respect people's votes and support the country for a peaceful transition of power.
In order to facilitate a peaceful transition of power in my country, I have initiated the National Coordination Council of Belarus. It will lead the process of peaceful transition of power via dialogue. It will immediately call for new and fair democratic presidential elections with international supervision. Honorable leaders of Europe, I call on you to support the awakening of Belarus.
More news coming up after a short break. Stay tuned. Moving on now, Brazil has reported more than 1,300 deaths and over 47,000 COVID-19 cases in the past 24 hours. While the U.S. has recorded more than 1,200 deaths overnight, raising the toll to over 171,000 with nearly 5.5 million infections. Globally, the pandemic has infected over 22.1 million people and claimed more than 780,000 lives. More details in this report.
Thousands are dying and getting infected worldwide daily by the new coronavirus as governments scramble to secure vaccine deals. Brazil has approved the final stage trials for Johnson & Johnson's experimental vaccine, the fourth to get a nod for testing in the country. In Argentina, government has reimposed lockdowns in parts of the country as cases tally crossed 305,000. Mexican health officials say the virus is on a steady decline in the country after reporting a drop in fatalities during the past week.
The trend is clear. Some indicators I will comment on in the slides consistently show the number of daily cases are decreasing, including the numbers of deaths, which have been very unfortunate, each and every one of them, but they have been in sustained decline for more than 6 weeks. Hospitalization have also decreased.
In Europe, the second wave is surging in many countries as governments reimpose lockdowns. Over in Australia, the government has secured a deal with British drug maker AstraZeneca for a potential vaccine, saying free doses will be provided to the public. While WHO Chief Tedros Ghebreyesus says the world needs to prevent vaccine nationalism.
It's critical that countries don't repeat the same mistakes. We need to prevent vaccine nationalism. And for this reason, WHO is working with governments and the private sector to both accelerate the science through the ACT Accelerator and ensure that new innovations are available to everyone, everywhere, starting with those at highest risk.
Mainland China has reported a further decline in cases with no new domestic transmissions, but only 17 imported new cases. In South Korea, the daily cases have hit a 5-month high with 297 infections being reported in the past 24 hours.
Meanwhile, India has reported the world's fourth highest number of daily COVID-19 deaths, as nearly 1,100 people lost their lives, taking the toll to almost 53,000. The Health Ministry said 64,531 new cases were recorded overnight, bringing the country's caseload to over 2.7 million. It said there are still over 676,000 active cases in the country. The ministry said Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu states make up 40% of all the confirmed cases. India still remains the third worst hit country from the infection after the United States and Brazil. Pakistan is observing a downward trend in COVID-19 active cases. The Health Ministry said over 90% of patients have recovered from the virus so far. The ministry said 11 people have died while 613 people tested positive in the past 24 hours. The country's death toll has risen to 6,201, while the infections are over 290,000. The ministry said the number of active cases has reduced to nearly 12,000. Sindh remains the worst hit province with over 126,000 infections, while Punjab has reported more than 95,000 cases. In the United States, the temperature of Death Valley's Furnace Creek in Southern California desert has soared to 54.4 Celsius during a blistering heat wave. This is the highest global temperature in more than a century. More about the heat wave in this report.
54.4 Celsius is the hottest temperature ever recorded on Earth in at least a century. It comes amid a heat wave on the U.S. West Coast, where temperatures are forecast to rise further this week. The scorching conditions have led to 2 days of blackout in California after a power plant malfunctioned. Governor Gavin Newsom has warned residents of more power outages over the next few days.
Times like these also have precipitated in pressure on our energy supply across the West, but particularly here in the state of California. It has put pressure that has created some temporary service interruptions that began on Friday, that moved into Saturday, were substantially mitigated on Sunday, but are very likely to continue today, Tuesday, and likely through Wednesday evening.
The independent system operator said it is expecting a statewide electrical supply shortage of 4,400 megawatts. Michael Mann, who heads the Earth System Science Center at Pennsylvania State University, warned that these high temperatures are more dangerous than they appear. He said lifestyle changes are not enough and policy changes are desperately needed to cool off the effects of climate change.
We would not be seeing these record temperatures or any of the unprecedented extreme weather events we've been seeing around the world in recent years if it were not for our warming of the...
Are helping to extinguish the fires.
Government data shows roughly 8,500 square kilometers, or nearly 6% of the Pantanal, burned from January to July. A local newspaper reported that most of the largest sanctuary for the blue hyacinthine macaw parrots has gone up in flames this year.
The impact of the fires is enormous. This is a very large mescal breeding ground as well as that of other animals. I just found a dead deer and a monkey and a dead monkey. The destruction will be enormous.
At the current pace, fires could approach the all-time record for any month since the records began in 1998. The blazes in the Pantanal comes amid rising concerns about fires in the Amazon, its much larger neighbor to the north.
Now in Colombia, a crafter, Edgar Alvarez, is making a statement in Bogota with clay. He is using his artwork to raise COVID-19 awareness and shed light on the lives of millions of Venezuelan migrants. More in this report.
Edgar Alvarez, a Colombian artist, is making a name for himself abroad by seeking to explain current affairs and historical events in an engaging way. His coronavirus caricature can be spotted in nooks of the Colombian capital, not far from where citizens etch out a life in street stalls as a way to make ends meet.
This pandemic has changed us, so it is essential to be able to depict people struggling with it, and that is where I come in to explain it with clay plasticine. It is precisely that, to bring a clear message to people, and that's how it works, with clay plasticine
in abstract. As Colombia is the main destination for Venezuelans fleeing from political, social, and economic crisis under the government of President Nicolas Maduro, he has molded figures to represent people fleeing their homes with what little belongings they can muster on their backs. Alvarez's craftivism has gone global, with hundreds of thousands of fans on Facebook and Twitter on his It's Explained Through Clay pages. His 2015 claymation entitled Los Invisibles touched on the problem of homelessness in the U.S. city of Los Angeles.
The US software giant Oracle has entered the race to acquire popular Chinese-owned short video app TikTok. President Donald Trump has vowed to shut down the app unless it's taken over by a US company by mid-September. Oracle said it held preliminary talks with TikTok's Chinese owner ByteDance. The company said it is considering purchasing the app's operations in the United States, Canada, Australia and New Zealand. Microsoft has been the lead contender to buy TikTok since it made the announcement earlier this month. ByteDance is opposed to selling any assets beyond those in the US, Canada, Australia and New Zealand. European markets are trading higher as investors followed the positive sentiment on Wall Street, where the S&P 500 and Nasdaq Composite set new overnight records. Investors also continue to monitor developments in the US-China trade war. The pan-European stock 600 edged almost 0.2% higher. Frankfurt's DAX has also gained by 0.2%. London's FTSE 100 has risen by 0.05%. France's CAC 40 has gained 0.17%. Earlier Asian Pacific markets traded mixed, with Seoul's Kospi and Nikkei 225 leading the gains. Oil and gas stocks shed 0.2%, while telecoms gained 0.6%. Now in football, Paris Saint-Germain have outclassed RB Leipzig by 3-0 to reach the final of the Champions League at Estadio de Luis. In their first Champions League final, the Parisians will face either Lyon or Bayern Munich on Sunday. Playing in Lisbon, Marquinhos, Angel Di Maria and Joan Bernat struck for the French side. PSG's only other European final appearances include UEFA Cup Winners' Cup finals in 1996 and 97. The club have gone out in the last 16 for the past 3 years, while Leipzig reached the last 4 only 11 years after their creation. And now let's have a look at the weather updates across the globe. Well, that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Take care.